So get this, podcast listeners, Ballot Harvesting 101. You want to take Ballot Harvesting 101? We'll move to California. Get this story. Of course, Democrats say, by the way, ballot harvesting never happens. It just never, ever, ever happens. I mean, it's impossible. Well, just reported a few hours ago, hundreds of California recall ballots, drugs, and a loaded gun is found out in a passed out felon's car. So this guy's in a car in California. He's passed out because he's obviously high on drugs. Got a gun, got drugs in the car, and he also happens to have hundreds of recall ballots. Remember, Gavin Newsom is being recalled. The election is on September 14th. This guy has hundreds of recall ballots in his car, and he's a felon. So the police in Torrance, California, said that the ballots would be sent ahead of Governor Newsom's recall election on September 14th. Hundreds of ballots for California Governor Gavin Newsom's recall election, drugs, and a loaded gun were found last week in a vehicle where a felon just passed out inside, authorities said Monday. Now, of course, even though this happened last week, it was only finally just reported in the mainstream media this week. Police responded to a call of a man passed out in a vehicle in a 7-Eleven parking lot, of course, in Torrance, California, on August 16th, the Torrance Police Department said. During the investigation, officers learned the suspect was a felon and had Xanax pills in his possession. Police said a further investigation found thousands of pieces of mail, including over 300 ballots for the upcoming recall election of embattled Governor Gavin Newsom, and they were all inside of his car. In addition to the mail and ballots, police found a loaded firearm, methamphetamines, a scale, a multiple California driver's licenses, and credit cards in other people's names. Police said new election ballots were being sent to those identified through the investigation and that the incident was not tied to any additional thefts and election ballots. It was not immediately clear how the ballots ended up in the suspect's vehicle. Give me a break. Or what he intended to do with them. Police said the incident is being investigated in partnership with the U.S. Postal Service and the Los Angeles County District Attorney Public Integrity Unit. So podcast listeners, let's break this down. We have a guy in California. He's a felon, drug addict, has a gun, so he's probably a drug dealer as well, because he's got a scale in his car as well. So he's obviously weighing the drugs. And he has hundreds of ballots in his car. So what does he have in his car that's worth money? Drugs are worth money. The gun is worth money. And the ballots are worth money. The credit cards he stole, those are worth money. The IDs he stole, those are worth money. And where would you steal those? You could probably steal them from the post office if you had someone that was part of the post office in an inside job, or you could just go from mailbox to mailbox. It's very common, by the way, in California. There have been articles throughout California and elsewhere speaking of this very issue. In fact, Victor David Hansen spoke of this issue a number of times too, where you have these gangs of illegal immigrants and they'll just go and open people's mailboxes literally right after the post office comes by and puts the mail in your mailbox, and they'll steal everything that's in there in the hopes that you either had a driver's license mailed to you or you had a credit card, renewal credit card mailed to you. They steal them and they use them, or they sell them. They make money from them. Guess what else is mailed to you? Your ballot is mailed to you in California because you vote by mail. And we were always told by Democrats, nothing can go wrong. Mail is the most secure way of doing it. Well, this guy has 300 of these recall ballots in his car. And what do you think he's going to do with them? Is he going to fill them out? No, of course he's not. He's going to sell them to someone who is going to fill them out. And if California really wants to get a handle on what's really going on in their elections, perhaps they should do a sting operation and find out whom is going to buy these ballots from this felon. Because you wouldn't take the ballots and have them all organized in bags. If you look at the picture online in this article, he's got the ballots and they're all neatly organized inside of bags, which leads one to believe that either A, he stole them from the mailboxes, or B, he stole them from the post office from someone who either works there or he just went there and he stole them himself. And why would he think that they had value? Because someone is going to pay him for them and they're going to fill them out. And obviously it's a Democrat who's going to do it. It's not going to be a Republican. It's going to be a Democrat because that's what they do. It's called ballot harvesting, ladies and gentlemen. You rip off the ballots and you rip off people's ID. You fill in the ballots because the ballots already had their name and so forth on them, and you mail them back in. Probably you don't even have to do that now. You just put them in a drop box. And that's how cheating occurs. It's called Ballot Harvesting 101. And yet in the United States of America, we have a Democrat Party that's saying, oh no, mail-in balloting is fine. Ballot harvesting is fine. Nothing ever goes wrong. It's why the Democrats are so beside themselves with this idea that the Republican Party throughout many Republican states is passing bills that requires voter ID, in-person voting, unless you have a real reason you can't vote in person. And they are trying to get rid of, in places like Texas, the idea of 24-hour drive-through voting. You know, it's like, it's so stupid, right? You got people drive-through voting because of the pandemic. And of course, you got the Democrats saying, well, drive-through voting should be legal everywhere, and it should be 24-hour drive-through voting everywhere because you're trying to limit people's opportunity to vote if you get rid of that. And as a conservative, common sense conservative, I'm going to say this to you. We need to get back to the common sense idea of voting in person. And voting in person means there is an election day. And if you want to have election week, okay, fine. Let's compromise. Let's have election week. You get to vote for 7 days straight. Not every day, of course. You have 7 days to vote. They're all in a row. And you must vote in person. And for those individuals who can show a reason, and obviously this will be very reasonable, the reason, you know, you're afraid of COVID because you're elderly. But I thought that's what the vaccine was for. But okay, fine. You can't get to the polling station for a variety of reasons because you were ill. Fine, then vote by mail. But you still need to provide an ID. And that ID needs to be, let's see. You need to put your driver's license number on the card. Maybe the last four of your social. Maybe some other IDs. Just some way of verifying that you are the one that actually filled out the ballot and mailed it in. And you must mail it in, not drop it off at a post office, at a drop box. Not even a post office drop box. It's a drop box that the election board runs, not even the post office. You should have to mail it in using the USPS. It just makes perfect sense. But I just want to say this. The Democrats, by the way, in Washington, still want to pass H.R. 1. They still want to pass H.R. 1. That is the bill that is a federal takeover of elections that, number one, enables ballot harvesting. Number two, prohibits, stops you from using voter ID. Stops you from doing it. I mean, can you imagine? And then encourages, of course, 24-hour voting centers because you need, hey, look, you need to have 24-hour voting centers because after all, there are some people that just can't vote between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. I mean, and they can't do it 7 days. They can't do it in that 7-day period for voting. It's just impossible. We have to really find ways of just laughing at Democrats in their face over this issue because it really is hysterically funny. I'm very proud that in the Maryland House of Delegates on the House floor, and this is on my personal YouTube page. I think it's the Mark Fisher for Delegate YouTube page. There is a debate, if you will, and it's a very measured debate on the Maryland House of Delegates floor, whereby I'm debating an amendment that I propose to prohibit ballot harvesting in the state of Maryland. And what was fascinating to me is that on the other side of the aisle, the person defending it, who, by the way, did the best she could, and she's a nice person. But her excuse was, well, Delegate Fisher, ballot harvesting doesn't happen in the state of Maryland. Well, actually, in statute in Maryland, you can ballot harvest. All you need to do is have the person whose ballot you are assisting with and carrying to the drop box or to the post office or to the election board. You just need to have them sign an affidavit. So what you need to do is photocopy about 5,000 affidavits, pretty easy to do. And you just have the person put their name there and sign it. And then you can act as their agent. And that's ballot harvesting, first of all, right? And so I think I even brought up the point, well, isn't that problematic? Because couldn't you just go and pay people to do it? Couldn't you? Does anyone try to, in the election board, does anyone verify that that affidavit is valid? And of course they don't. They don't. And they just take that piece of paper and they put it in a file somewhere. And they, if that, I doubt they do. I doubt they even put it in a file. They probably just throw it away. And this gets back to the same thing that just happened in California. Ballot harvesting occurs because there is mass mail out of ballots from the election board to everybody's post office box or to their mailbox. Almost always it's a mailbox. And so it's very easy to steal all of those ballots that were mailed out. Or if you don't want to do that, then you can just ballot harvest. So what you do is you go to areas where there is very low participation in elections. By the way, those tend to be minority areas. It's true. And you go door to door and you offer to buy their ballot for them. And that's why this guy in California, podcast listeners, that's why this guy in California had all those ballots. He didn't have them because he wants Gavin Newsom to win or Gavin Newsom to lose. Why would he care? He's a felon. He's a drug addict. He sells drugs. He's got a scale in his car. The reason he has all of those ballots is because there is someone who's willing to pay him for those ballots. And that someone is a ballot harvester. And they're going to fill out those ballots and they're going to cheat in a very, very closely contested election where that could make all of the difference in the world in an election. Think about that. And that's ballot harvesting 101.